Hi, I'm Kellen. I'm the clavinet guy here at Chicago Electric Piano Company, and today we're going to talk about this instrument, the Hohner Clavinet I, the first clavinet ever made. This instrument was invented by a guy named Ernst Zacharias. The prototype was made in 1961, and this model was released in 1964, subsequently followed by the Clavinet II, the Clavinet L, and then more famously, the Clavinet C came out in 1968, very famous for use by Stevie Wonder. And then this, probably the most iconic clavinet model, the D6, was released in 1971. Production carried on for most of the 70s. In 1978, they released the Clavinet Duo, combining both a clavinet and a pianet action into one instrument. And in 1979, they released the E7 model, which they would produce until 1982 when they ceased production of the clavinet. About 38,000 total clavinets were produced. How cool. The Clavinet I was originally marketed for home use. The idea behind this instrument was to make an electric clavichord. So Ernst Zacharias was listening to Bach harpsichord pieces and clavichord pieces and wanted an instrument that could be mass produced for home use. So if you find advertising materials for this instrument, you'll notice there's supposed to be a music rack here and people are reading classical music. That was the original intention for this. Obviously, as this became very popular in pop use, they realized that they'd find a different gold mine. There are a few things about the Clavinet I that are unique that would quickly be discontinued after this model. Probably most notably, the internal amplifier, which we have a microphone on here. You can hear it. Sounds great. Actually, a really useful feature if you're just playing clavinet at home and want to enjoy the instrument by yourself. It's really nice. You still get the pickup selectors and a volume control that all apply to that internal speaker. And it sounds pretty nice. It's a nice volume. Speaking of the amplifier, just like a Clavinet C, which again was released in 1968, and this is 64, so all of those years, the preamplifier was essentially the same. This has two switches and a volume control. The switches select between either the pickup that is mounted above the harp or the one below. And then you can also have them either in a dual mode, like a humbucking mode, or both on but out of phase. The Clavinet II discontinued this amplifier, but was definitely still marketed towards home use, as was the Clavinet L, a very cool instrument that had reverse colored keys, so the naturals were black and the sharps and flats were white. It also had 3 legs, very cool mid-century modern design. Much like Danish furniture or other furniture of this era, this clavinet's in a wooden case. It's a walnut-style veneer. These legs are imitations of the originals that we had reproduced here, but faithful to the original design. One thing that I think is kind of funny about this model they would quickly probably realize was a performance hindrance is that these cheek blocks are so high against the key bed that it's actually really hard to play on the far extended register of this instrument. You can see on the D6 here, your hand can go right over the side, but I cannot hit these keys from here. And not that you would need to, but you understand what I'm saying. One other notable difference about the Clavinet I compared to the D6 or the C is it's clearly marketed for home use from this feature. It's got this fold over wooden top that you can lock, keep your kids out of the instrument. When it got into the C and D6 era, they were using Tolex on the outside of these cases. There was a fold-over wooden top that latched, so it was clearly meant to be brought to gigs or performances, whereas this is definitely meant to stay at home. All right, let's take a look inside the Clavinet I here. Just pop it open. This panel just clips right out, which is pretty convenient. And we'll go right to the elephant in the room, so to speak here. This massive battery compartment. You notice 4 D-cell batteries there, which are different than the 9-volt battery that subsequent models would have. These supply voltage for the internal amplifier, and they last a long time, this type of battery. So that's really the design there. There's also this switch you'll notice, which can engage or disengage the internal speaker. Of course, if you're playing at home, you probably have the speaker on most of the time. Beyond those two things, most of what you'll find in here is not very foreign compared to a later clavinet, especially a C. So this keyframe The style of kind of fulcrum that's along here was the same for the Clavinet 1, 2, L, and C. They wouldn't change until the very end of C production. They started making the keyframes that you'll find in a D6. Beyond that, the pickups in here are also the same up until the D6 period. They have two poles. In the D6 period, it changes to a pickup that I think has 6 or 7. So one thing that's nice about these early clavinets is you don't have as many of those dead spots that you find on the pickup that has lots of pieces. There's just one spot in the center where you have to avoid a string being direct above it. And then the harp itself really never changed in any of clavinet production. And even the prototype, I guess, was this exact harp frame. So they nailed it from the get-go on that. One other thing to note that's somewhat unique to the early clavinets is this power switch here. So you can turn the instrument on or off. Later in the D6 and even C period, they switched to a pot that when it's turned all the way to the left, there's a switch so that it turns the instrument off and you just turn it on by increasing the volume. Whereas this one is a more typical knob with no switch attached to it. So you've got this to turn your clav on and off.
How cool is das?
Now we're going to take a look inside of the tuners of the Clavinet 1, which are, to me, one of the more interesting parts of it compared to a later clavinet. So to remove this tuning panel, you would typically have some flathead screws. We replace those with thumb screws to make it a little more user serviceable. All right. So at first glance, this maybe doesn't look super different from a D6 or Clavinet C, but upon a bit of inspection, you'll notice that these are not mechanized tuners. These are just one-to-one pins that are holding the strings in, much like a violin would have, or even a piano. In order to make this really doable by a user, because using a screwdriver, it's really hard to be precise with turning these, Hohner provided this tool, which makes it really possible to tune this effectively. But even still, it requires some precision and technique. So I'll just demonstrate by playing this A flat key and just see how just a small amount of movement here will really change the tuning. So that's maybe an eighth of a turn. There it goes. So this tool was a very smart thing to include by Hohner, and this did come with the instrument originally. Also to note, later clavinets would not have this brass bar that rides along all the strings here. It helps the strings get from the string trees here down to the tuner itself. Wasn't necessary with the later tuners. Note also how the labeling of each note changes as you go up the register of the instrument. You've got some bold stamping here with just sharp symbols on it. Then you've got sharps labeled with DIS or IS. And then as you get higher on the instrument, you even get the octaves labeled. And you'll also note that the note B natural is labeled H, B flats are labeled B.
Das ist typical mit Ernst's Musikschule.
Thanks for watching our little summary of the Hohner Clavinet 1 here. Very cool instrument, especially for clavinet enthusiasts like us. It's a pleasure to restore this instrument. If you've got one, please send it to us. We'll get it in tip-top shape. Hope you found this stuff interesting. We sure do. Thanks for watching.